The airplane cabin erupted in chaos at 30,000 feet. Two screaming babies, identical twins in designer clothes, shrieked so loudly that passengers pressed their hands over their ears. Their father, a tall man in an expensive suit, paced the narrow aisle helplessly, bouncing one wailing infant while a nanny struggled with the other. Flight attendants rushed back and forth with bottles and toys, but nothing worked. The cries grew louder and louder until every person on that plane wanted to disappear. Then, something impossible happened. A small girl, no older than 7, with tangled brown hair and a faded yellow dress, stood up from her seat in the back of the plane. She walked down the aisle like she owned the world, even though her sneakers had holes in them. When she reached the screaming twins, she did something that made the entire airplane fall silent. The babies stopped crying instantly. The millionaire father froze. Every passenger stared in complete shock. But what she did next would change everything. Because this little girl was hiding a secret that nobody on that plane could have guessed. Not even the millionaire who was about to discover that the most valuable thing in his life had been right in front of him the whole time. We share powerful stories that uncover hidden truths and challenge perspectives. Subscribe to stay updated, share to keep others safe, and comment where you're watching from. 3 hours earlier, Marcus Wellington had been in the worst mood of his entire life. He stood in the airport terminal, checking his gold watch for the 5th time in 2 minutes. His private jet had mechanical problems, which meant he had to fly commercial like a regular person. Marcus hated flying commercial. He hated waiting in lines. He hated sitting near strangers. Most of all, he hated that his twin babies, Oliver and Olivia, seemed to hate everything today. "Mr. Wellington, we need to board now," said Janet, the nanny he'd hired just 3 weeks ago. She was the 4th nanny this month. The other 3 had quit. Marcus looked at his 9-month-old twins. Oliver's face was already turning red, getting ready to scream. Olivia was chewing on her fist, which meant she'd start crying any second. The babies had been fussy all morning, refusing their bottles, spitting out their food, and crying at every little thing. "Fine," Marcus muttered. He picked up his leather briefcase with one hand and tried to hold Oliver with the other arm. The baby immediately started squirming and whimpering. Marcus Wellington was one of the richest men in California. He owned 15 hotels, 3 restaurants, and a tech company worth millions. He could buy anything he wanted, but he couldn't figure out how to make his own children happy. His wife, Caroline, had left him 6 months ago, right after the twins were born. She said he cared more about money than family. Marcus told himself she was wrong, but deep down he wondered if she was right. As they walked toward the gate, Marcus noticed people staring at him. Some recognized him from magazines and television. Others just stared at his expensive clothes and fancy watch. He was used to attention. What he wasn't used to was the way people looked at his crying babies with annoyance and pity. They boarded the plane and found their seats in first class. Marcus had bought 4 first-class tickets, one for him, one for Janet, and one each for the twins, even though babies could sit on laps. He wanted space. He wanted distance from the other passengers. But first class couldn't protect him from what was about to happen. As soon as the plane started moving, Oliver began to cry. Not a soft cry, a loud, angry scream that made everyone turn around. Olivia joined in 2 seconds later, as if they'd planned it. Their cries bounced off the airplane walls and filled every corner of the cabin. "Give them their bottles," Marcus told Janet, raising his voice over the screaming. "They won't take them, sir," Janet said, looking stressed. She tried 3 times already. The babies pushed the bottles away and cried even harder. Marcus felt everyone's eyes on him. A businessman in the seat across the aisle gave him an angry look. A woman behind him sighed loudly. He felt his face get hot with embarrassment. Marcus Wellington, who commanded respect in every boardroom and closed million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, couldn't control 2 tiny babies. The plane took off, climbing higher into the sky. The babies cried louder. Marcus tried holding Oliver, bouncing him gently like he'd seen parents do on television. It didn't work. Janet tried singing to Olivia. That didn't work either. They tried pacifiers, toys, blankets, everything. Nothing helped. 30 minutes into the flight, a flight attendant named Susan approached them with a worried smile. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked. "Unless you can make babies stop crying, no," Marcus snapped. He immediately felt bad for being rude, but he was too stressed to apologize. Susan tried anyway. She brought warm milk, cold milk, and apple juice. She made funny faces and silly sounds. The twins screamed through all of it. Other passengers started complaining loudly. Someone said, "Can't you control your children?" Another person asked to be moved to a different seat, but the flight was full. Marcus stood up and started pacing the aisle with Oliver in his arms, but the baby only cried harder. He could feel sweat dripping down his back despite the cool air conditioning. His perfect, controlled life was falling apart at 30,000 feet, and everyone was watching. That's when he noticed her. All the way in the back of the plane, in the last row of seats, sat a little girl. She looked about 7 years old, with messy brown hair pulled into a crooked ponytail. Her yellow dress looked old and worn, like it had been washed 100 times. Her sneakers had holes near the toes. She was traveling alone, watching everything with curious brown eyes. But Marcus barely glanced at her. He was too busy trying to calm Oliver, too focused on his own embarrassment. He didn't notice the way the little girl leaned forward in her seat, studying the crying babies with intense interest. He didn't see her whisper something to herself. The crying continued for another 20 minutes. Marcus's arms ached from holding Oliver. Janet looked ready to cry herself. The babies' faces were bright red, soaked with tears. Their screams had become hoarse and desperate. "I'm so sorry, everyone," Marcus finally shouted to the whole plane. "I'm trying my best." But his best wasn't good enough. The twins wailed on, and the passengers' anger grew thicker in the air. Marcus felt like the biggest failure in the world. He had everything money could buy, but he couldn't do the one simple thing every parent should be able to do: comfort his own children. Then, soft footsteps padded down the aisle. Marcus was bouncing Oliver desperately, not paying attention to anything else. He didn't notice the little girl approaching until she was standing right next to him. She barely came up to his waist. Her yellow dress had a small stain on the front, but her eyes were confident and calm. "Excuse me, mister," she said in a clear, strong voice. "I can help." Marcus looked down at her, confused and exhausted. "What?" "I can make your babies stop crying," the little girl said simply. "If you let me." Marcus almost laughed. Here he was, with a professional nanny and all the money in the world, and a child in a worn-out dress thought she could help? But then he looked at Oliver's red, tear-stained face and heard Olivia's hoarse screams behind him. What did he have to lose? "Fine," he said, too tired to argue. "Try." The little girl reached up, and Marcus carefully transferred Oliver into her small arms. She was surprisingly strong for her size. She held the baby against her chest, one hand supporting his head, and started swaying gently from side to side. Then she began to hum. It wasn't a song Marcus recognized. The melody was simple and sweet, almost like a lullaby but different somehow. Older. The little girl hummed softly, her eyes closed, rocking Oliver in a gentle rhythm. Her voice was quiet but steady, filling the space around them with an unexpected calm. Oliver's screams started to soften. His cries turned to whimpers. Then, incredibly, he went quiet. His tiny fist grabbed onto the girl's worn dress, and his eyes started to close. Within 60 seconds, Oliver was asleep. The entire airplane fell silent. Every passenger stared in complete shock. Marcus couldn't believe his eyes. "How did you?" But the little girl was already walking toward Janet and Olivia. She hummed the same mysterious melody, and Olivia's cries began to fade too. The little girl touched Olivia's cheek with one gentle finger, still humming, still swaying. Olivia's eyes grew heavy. Her screams turned to soft sighs. Then she too fell asleep, peaceful and calm. The plane was so quiet you could hear the engines humming. 100 passengers sat in stunned silence, watching the small girl in a faded yellow dress hold the answer that a millionaire and his nanny couldn't find. Marcus stared at her, his mind racing with questions. "Who are you?" he whispered. "How did you do that?" The little girl looked up at him with those calm brown eyes. "My name is Sophie," she said, "and I did it because babies need to feel safe." "Your babies were scared." "Scared," Marcus repeated. "Scared of what?" "Scared because they didn't feel their mama's love," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Babies can tell when someone is holding them just because they have to, not because they want to. They can feel it in your hands. Your heart wasn't in it, mister. You were holding them, but you weren't really there." Marcus felt like he'd been slapped. This little girl, this child who looked like she didn't have much money or fancy things, had just told him the truth that no one else dared to say. He'd been going through the motions of being a father, but he hadn't been present. He'd been thinking about his business deals, his reputation, his schedule. He hadn't been thinking about what Oliver and Olivia actually needed. Marcus started to say something, but his throat felt tight. Sophie carefully handed Oliver back to Janet, who took the sleeping baby like he was made of glass. Then Sophie returned Olivia to Marcus. As his daughter settled into his arms, still peacefully asleep, Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. A feeling he'd been pushing away for months, maybe years. "Thank you," he managed to say to Sophie. She smiled. "You're welcome, mister." Then she started walking back to her seat at the rear of the plane. Marcus watched her go, noticing things he hadn't seen before. Her shoes were definitely too small, her toes pressed against the front. Her dress had been mended in several places with crooked stitches. She carried no backpack, no toys, nothing except a small paper bag that looked like it might contain a sandwich. "Wait," Marcus called after her. "Sophie, wait a minute." The little girl turned around. "Where are you going? Who's traveling with you?" Marcus asked. "I'm going to New York City," Sophie said. "And I'm by myself." "Well, I was supposed to be with my foster mom, but she had to work, so she put me on the plane alone. I'm going to meet my new foster family." Foster family. The words hit Marcus hard. This little girl who'd just shown him more wisdom than any adult in his life was bouncing between homes, wearing old clothes, flying alone to meet strangers. "How old are you?" he asked. 7, Sophie said. "Almost 8. 7 years old and already so wise, so calm, so giving." Marcus felt ashamed of himself. Here was a child who had nothing, and yet she'd stood up to help him without being asked. She'd known exactly what to do while he, with all his money and power, had been completely lost. "Come sit with us," Marcus heard himself say. "Please, in first class. We have an extra seat." Sophie's eyes widened. "Really? I've never sat in first class before." "Really?" Marcus said firmly. He looked at the flight attendant, Susan, who'd been watching everything with misty eyes. "Can we move her seat up here?" "Absolutely," Susan said, smiling. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get your things." But Sophie had no things to get. She just followed Susan to the first-class cabin, holding her small paper bag. Marcus watched other passengers whisper to each other as she passed. Some smiled. Others looked confused. A few looked at Marcus with new respect. Sophie settled into the empty first-class seat next to Marcus. She looked around at the leather seats, the extra legroom, the fancy pillows with wide, amazed eyes. "Wow," she whispered. "This is so nice." Marcus found himself smiling for the first time all day. "You deserve it," he said, and he meant it. For the next hour, Marcus did something he never did. He talked, really talked. Not business talk or polite conversation, but real talking. He asked Sophie about her life, and she told him her story. She'd been in foster care since she was 4 years old, when her parents died in a car accident. She'd lived with 7 different families. Some were nice, some weren't. She'd learned to be independent, to take care of herself, to find joy in small things. "Don't you get sad?" Marcus asked. "Moving around so much?" Sophie thought about it. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But being sad doesn't help anything, so I try to help other people instead. It makes me feel better." Marcus looked down at Olivia, still sleeping peacefully in his arms. Her tiny hand had wrapped around his finger. When had that happened? He'd been so busy talking to Sophie that he hadn't even noticed. But he felt it now, the weight of his daughter, the warmth of her, the trust. "You said my babies were scared because they didn't feel love," Marcus said quietly. "How did you know that?" Sophie's smile faded a little. "Because that's how I feel sometimes," she said. "When you're little and you don't feel safe, you cry. You cry because you want someone to really see you, not just look at you. Your babies were crying because they wanted you to really be their daddy, not just the man holding them." The words pierced straight through Marcus's heart. He thought about the last 6 months since Caroline left. He'd thrown himself into work, telling himself he was providing for his children. But providing money wasn't the same as providing love. He'd hired nannies to do the hard work while he attended meetings and closed deals. He'd been present in body but absent in spirit. "I've made mistakes," Marcus admitted, surprised at how easy it was to say out loud. "Big mistakes." "Everyone makes mistakes, mister," Sophie said wisely. "The important thing is fixing them." Before Marcus could respond, something unexpected happened. A man stood up from his seat in the economy section and started walking toward them. He was middle-aged, with gray hair and an angry red face. Marcus recognized him as one of the passengers who'd complained the loudest when the babies were crying. "I just wanted to say something," the man announced loudly, stopping in the aisle next to Marcus's seat. Several passengers looked up, worried there might be more trouble. But then the man smiled. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "I was rude earlier. I complained about your babies, and I shouldn't have. That little girl just taught all of us a lesson about kindness." He nodded toward Sophie. "Thank you, young lady. You reminded me to be more patient." Sophie beamed. "You're welcome." The man walked back to his seat, and suddenly other passengers started speaking up too. A woman across the aisle said, "That was beautiful. What you did, sweetheart." An elderly couple smiled and waved. Even the businessman who'd given Marcus angry looks earlier gave him a respectful nod. The mood in the airplane had completely changed. It wasn't just that the babies had stopped crying. Something deeper had shifted. Sophie's simple act of kindness had reminded everyone on that plane of what really mattered. Marcus felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw 3 missed calls from his assistant and 7 emails marked urgent. His first instinct was to check them immediately to dive back into work mode. But then he looked at Olivia sleeping in his arms and Sophie watching him with those knowing brown eyes. He put the phone away without reading the emails. "Tell me more about your new foster family," Marcus said to Sophie. "Are you excited to meet them?" Sophie's smile wobbled just a little. "I guess so," she said. "I don't know much about them. Mrs. Patterson, my caseworker, just said they're a nice family in Brooklyn. They have a house with a backyard." "That sounds nice," Marcus offered. "Yeah," Sophie said, but her voice was small. "I hope they like me. Sometimes families don't like me after they meet me. They say I'm too quiet or too serious for a kid." Marcus felt anger flash through him. How could anyone not like this incredible little girl? She was wise beyond her years, kind, helpful, and brave. She'd traveled alone without complaint. She'd helped strangers without being asked. She deserved a family who would cherish her. "If they don't like you, they're fools," Marcus said firmly. "You're amazing, Sophie." Her face lit up like he'd given her $1 million. "Really? Really?" Marcus promised. They talked more as the flight continued. Sophie told him about school, about how she loved reading and drawing. She told him about a teacher who'd been kind to her and a lunch lady who always gave her extra cookies. She talked about small joys and simple hopes. Marcus found himself hanging on every word. Janet, the nanny, had been watching quietly from her seat with Oliver. Now she leaned over and whispered to Marcus, "Mr. Wellington, I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" Marcus asked. "Present," Janet said simply. "Really here." She was right. Marcus realized he felt more awake, more alive right now than he had in months, maybe years. He wasn't thinking about his next meeting or his stock prices or his business competitors. He was just here, in this moment, with his sleeping daughter and this remarkable little girl. But then turbulence hit. The plane shook violently. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Sophie grabbed the armrests, her eyes wide with fear. Marcus instinctively wrapped one arm around Olivia and reached over with his other hand to steady Sophie. "It's okay," he said calmly, even though his own heart was racing. "Just bumpy air. It'll pass." The plane dropped suddenly, making several passengers gasp. Overhead bins rattled. A bag fell out and hit the floor with a thud. Sophie squeezed her eyes shut. "I don't like this," she whispered. "Hey," Marcus said gently. "Look at me, Sophie." She opened her eyes. "Remember what you told my babies?" Marcus said. "You said they needed to feel safe. Right now you're safe. Promise. This plane is strong, the pilots are trained, and you're not alone. I'm right here." Sophie took a shaky breath and nodded. The turbulence continued, but she seemed calmer. She kept her eyes on Marcus, trusting him. In that moment, Marcus understood something profound. This was what it meant to be there for someone. Not just physically present, but emotionally available. Ready to provide comfort and strength when it was needed. This was what his babies had been crying for. This was what Caroline had begged him for before she left. The turbulence finally stopped, and the plane smoothed out. Sophie let out a relieved breath. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Thank you," Marcus replied, "for everything." The rest of the flight passed peacefully. Oliver and Olivia slept the whole way. Sophie read a tattered book she'd pulled from her paper bag. A fairy tale about a princess and a dragon. Marcus found himself reading over her shoulder, drawn into the story despite himself. As they started their descent into New York, reality began creeping back in. Marcus would have to say goodbye to Sophie soon. She'd go to her new foster family in Brooklyn, and he'd go back to his busy, empty life in Manhattan. The thought made him sad in a way he couldn't quite explain. "Sophie," he said suddenly, "can I have your caseworker's information?" "Mrs. Patterson, you said." Sophie looked confused. "Why?" I want to make sure you're okay. That your new family is treating you well. Is that all right?" Sophie's face broke into the biggest smile he'd seen from her. "You'd do that?" "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "I would." She carefully pulled a wrinkled paper from her bag and handed it to him. It had Mrs. Patterson's name and phone number written in neat handwriting. Marcus took a picture of it with his phone. The plane landed smoothly. Passengers began gathering their things and standing up, eager to get off. Marcus carefully woke Olivia, who opened her eyes and looked up at him without crying. She seemed peaceful, content even. He strapped her into her carrier and helped Janet with Oliver. Then he turned to Sophie. "Can I walk you to baggage claim? Make sure someone's there to meet you." "Okay," Sophie agreed. They made their way off the plane together. Marcus in his expensive suit carrying one baby, Janet with the other, and Sophie in her worn yellow dress walking between them. Other passengers smiled at them as they passed. The angry businessman from earlier stopped and handed Sophie a $20 bill. "Buy yourself something nice, kid," he said gruffly. Sophie's eyes went wide. "Thank you, mister." At baggage claim, they found a woman holding a sign that said, "Sophie Mills." She was thin and tired-looking, with frizzy red hair and an impatient expression. This was Mrs. Patterson, the caseworker. "There you are," Mrs. Patterson said when she spotted Sophie. "You're late. The flight should have landed 10 minutes ago." She didn't sound warm or welcoming. She sounded annoyed. "There was turbulence," Sophie explained quietly. Mrs. Patterson finally noticed Marcus standing there. Her expression changed immediately. "Oh, Mr. Wellington. I didn't realize, I recognize you from the news. Are you?" "I was sitting near Sophie on the flight," Marcus said coolly. He didn't like this woman's energy. "She was very helpful with my children." "Well, that's nice," Mrs. Patterson said dismissively. She grabbed Sophie's shoulder. "Come on, we need to go. The foster family is waiting." Sophie looked back at Marcus with sad eyes. "Bye, Mr. Wellington. Bye, babies." "Wait," Marcus said. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. He couldn't let Sophie walk away with this cold woman to meet strangers without knowing more. "Mrs. Patterson, can I speak with you for a moment?" Privately, Mrs. Patterson looked annoyed but nodded. "Sophie, stay right there." She walked a few steps away with Marcus. "I want to know more about the family Sophie's going to," Marcus said quietly but firmly. "Who are they? Have they been thoroughly vetted?" Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. "Mr. Wellington, I appreciate your concern, but this is official foster care business. The family has been approved through all proper channels." "That's not what I asked," Marcus pressed. "Who are they?" "They're a couple in Brooklyn, the Hendersons. They've fostered before. Everything is in order." Mrs. Patterson's tone made it clear she thought this conversation was over. But Marcus wasn't done. He glanced back at Sophie, who was standing alone, looking small and vulnerable. She deserved better than this bureaucratic coldness. She deserved a family who would see how special she was. "I'd like to," Marcus started to say, but then his phone rang. He looked at the caller ID. His lawyer. The call he'd been waiting for all week about a major business deal. Marcus looked at the phone, then at Sophie, then back at the phone. 6 months ago, he would have answered immediately. Business always came first. But today something had changed. He declined the call and put his phone in his pocket. "I'd like to visit Sophie," Marcus said firmly to Mrs. Patterson, "to make sure she's settling in well. Would that be possible?" Mrs. Patterson's mouth fell open. "That's unusual, Mr. Wellington. We don't typically allow outside parties to." "I'm not an outside party," Marcus interrupted. "Sophie and I formed a connection on that flight. I care about her well-being. Surely the foster care system can accommodate occasional visits from someone who wants to support a child." Mrs. Patterson looked flustered. I'll have to check with my supervisor. I can't make promises." "Please do," Marcus said. He pulled out his business card and handed it to her. "Call me within 3 days with an answer." Then he walked back to Sophie and knelt down so they were eye to eye. Olivia was still strapped to his chest, and she reached out one tiny hand toward Sophie's face. Sophie gently held the baby's fingers and smiled. "You're going to be okay," Marcus told Sophie, "and I'm going to check on you. That's a promise." "Really?" Sophie's eyes filled with hope. "Really," Marcus said. "You taught me something important today, Sophie. You taught me how to be present, how to really see the people in front of me. I won't forget that, and I won't forget you." Sophie threw her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. Marcus hugged her back, careful not to squish Olivia between them. When Sophie pulled away, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "Thank you for being kind to me, Mr. Wellington. Thank you for being kind to my babies," Marcus replied. "To me." Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat impatiently. "We really need to go now." Marcus stood up, and Sophie picked up her paper bag. As she started walking away with Mrs. Patterson, Sophie turned back one more time and waved. Marcus waved back, his heart heavy. Janet appeared at his elbow. "That was quite something, sir," she said softly. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "It was." They collected their luggage and headed toward the exit. Marcus's driver was waiting outside with the black car. As they loaded the babies and bags into the vehicle, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Sophie. That worn yellow dress, those 2 small shoes, that incredible spirit. His phone buzzed again. 3 more missed calls, a dozen emails. The world of business and money was pulling at him, demanding his attention like always. But for the first time in years, Marcus didn't care. "Take us home," he told his driver. "And tomorrow clear my morning schedule. I have some important calls to make." Janet looked at him in surprise. Marcus Wellington never cleared his schedule for anything. The car pulled away from the airport. Through the window, Marcus watched the city lights begin to twinkle as evening approached. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Sophie was meeting her new foster family. He hoped they were kind. He hoped they saw what he saw, a remarkable little girl who deserved the world. Marcus looked down at Olivia in his lap and Oliver in Janet's arms. Both babies were still calm, still peaceful. He thought about what Sophie had said, Your heart wasn't in it. She'd been right, but she'd also shown him how to fix it, how to be present, how to lead with love instead of duty. His phone buzzed yet again. This time, Marcus didn't even look at it. Instead, he started humming. The same simple melody Sophie had hummed to calm his babies. He didn't know where it came from or what it was called, but it felt right. It felt like a promise to his children, to Sophie, and to himself. Things were going to change. Things had to change. But as the car merged onto the highway, heading toward Manhattan, Marcus had no idea just how much everything was about to change. He had no idea that in 3 days, he would receive a phone call that would shake him to his core. He had no idea that Sophie's worn yellow dress and 2 small shoes hid a mystery that would unravel his entire world. And he definitely had no idea that the little girl who'd calmed his babies with a simple melody was connected to him in a way that would change all their lives forever. The phone call came exactly 3 days later, just as Marcus was finishing a morning meeting with his hotel managers. "Mr. Wellington, it's Mrs. Patterson from Child Services," the voice on the other end said. She sounded different than before, nervous, almost scared. "I need to speak with you urgently. It's about Sophie Mills." Marcus's heart jumped into his throat. He immediately stood up from the conference table, ignoring the confused looks from his employees. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's physically fine," Mrs. Patterson said quickly. "But there's been an incident. The foster placement didn't work out. The Hendersons returned her after 2 days. 2 days. Marcus felt anger burning in his chest. "What do you mean they returned her? She's not a piece of furniture." "Mr. Wellington, please calm down," Mrs. Patterson said, though her voice shook. "These things happen sometimes. The family said Sophie was too withdrawn, too quiet. They wanted a more energetic child." Marcus wanted to scream. Sophie was withdrawn because she'd been bounced around between families her whole life. She was quiet because she'd learned that speaking up didn't always help. How could these people not see what an amazing kid she was? "Where is she now?" Marcus demanded. "She's at a temporary group home in Queens. It's just until we can find another placement." "But Mr. Wellington, there's something else. Something strange." Marcus pressed the phone closer to his ear. "What?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated. "Sophie has been asking for you. Constantly. She keeps saying she needs to tell you something important. She won't tell us what it is. She insists it has to be you. She's barely eaten in 2 days. She just sits by the window and asks when Mr. Wellington is coming." Something twisted in Marcus's chest. That brave little girl who'd helped his babies, who'd traveled alone without complaint, was now sitting in a group home waiting for him. The thought made him feel sick. "Give me the address," Marcus said. "I'm coming right now." "Mr. Wellington, I don't think that's the address. Now." Mrs. Patterson sighed and gave him the address of the group home. Marcus grabbed his jacket and car keys, leaving his confused employees sitting around the conference table. Janet was at his penthouse apartment with the twins, so he texted her quickly. "Emergency. Be back later. Baby's okay?" She responded immediately, "Yes, both sleeping." "Everything all right?" Marcus didn't answer. He was already running toward the elevator. The drive to Queens took 45 minutes through terrible traffic. Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He kept thinking about Sophie's face when Mrs. Patterson had dragged her away at the airport. That hopeful smile. That wave goodbye. She'd trusted him when he promised to check on her. And those monsters, he couldn't think of them as anything else, had sent her back like she was defective merchandise. Finally, Marcus pulled up in front of a large, gray building that looked more like a prison than a home. The sign out front said, "Sunshine Group Home for Children," but there was nothing sunny about it. The paint was peeling. The windows were barred. A chain-link fence surrounded a small, grassless yard. Marcus's stomach turned. This was where they'd put Sophie? He walked inside and found a tired-looking woman sitting at a desk. Her name tag said, "Gloria." "I'm here to see Sophie Mills," Marcus said. "Mrs. Patterson from Child Services called me." Gloria looked him up and down, taking in his expensive suit and gold watch. You the millionaire? I'm Marcus Wellington, yes? Gloria's expression softened slightly. That girl hasn't stopped talking about you. Come on, I'll take you to her. They walked down a long hallway with fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered. Marcus could hear children's voices behind closed doors. Some laughing, some crying, some shouting. The smell of old cafeteria food hung in the air. Everything about this place felt cold and institutional. Gloria stopped at a door marked Girls' Room 3 and knocked. Sophie, you have a visitor. The door flew open so fast it banged against the wall. Sophie stood there in the same yellow dress from the airplane, now even more wrinkled. Her hair was messier than before. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. But when she saw Marcus, her whole face transformed. Mr. Wellington, she cried. She threw herself at him, wrapping her thin arms around his waist and holding on like she might never let go. Marcus knelt down and hugged her back, feeling her shake against him. Hey, Sophie, I'm here. I'm here. You came, she whispered. I knew you would. I knew it. Gloria cleared her throat. You can use the visiting room. End of the hall on the left. 30 minutes. Okay? If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. Marcus nodded, and Sophie took his hand, pulling him down the hallway. Her hand was so small in his, so fragile. They reached the visiting room, a depressing space with plastic chairs and a table bolted to the floor. But Sophie didn't seem to notice. She just stared at Marcus like he was the most important person in the world. I'm so sorry about the Hendersons, Marcus said, sitting down across from her. Mrs. Patterson told me what happened. Sophie shrugged, trying to act like it didn't hurt, but Marcus could see the pain in her eyes. It's okay. I'm used to it. It's not okay, Marcus said firmly. You deserved better than that. You deserve a family who sees how special you are. Tears filled Sophie's eyes. Do you really think I'm special? I know you are, Marcus said. Sophie, Mrs. Patterson said you needed to tell me something important. What is it? Sophie glanced at the door, making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned forward and whispered, It's about your babies. About Olivia and Oliver. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What about them? Sophie took a deep breath. On the airplane, when I held them, I felt something strange. Mr. Wellington, I think your babies are sick. Sick? Marcus's heart started racing. What do you mean? They seemed fine after you calmed them down. Not sick like a cold or flu, Sophie said urgently. Sick in a different way. When I touched Oliver's head, it felt too warm. Not fever warm, wrong warm. And Olivia's breathing was funny. Too fast, then too slow. I felt it when I held her. Marcus wanted to dismiss this as a child's imagination, but something stopped him. Sophie had known exactly how to calm his babies when no one else could. She'd sensed what they needed. What if she was sensing something else now? Sophie, have you told anyone else about this? Marcus asked. She shook her head. I tried to tell Mrs. Patterson, but she said I was being dramatic. She said I was making up stories for attention. But I'm not, Mr. Wellington. I promise I'm not. Something's wrong with your babies. I can feel it. Marcus studied her face. She wasn't lying. Whatever she believed she'd felt, she believed it completely. And her words echoed something that had been nagging at the back of his mind. The twins had been fussier than usual lately. More irritable. The pediatrician had said it was normal, just a phase. But what if it wasn't? Okay, Marcus said slowly. I believe you. Sophie's eyes widened. You do? Yes, I'll take them to see a specialist. Get them checked thoroughly. Marcus reached across the table and held both of Sophie's hands. Thank you for telling me. That took courage. Sophie bit her lip, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me. Everyone always thinks I'm weird because I notice things other people don't. You're not weird, Marcus said gently. You're observant. That's a gift. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sophie asked quietly, Mr. Wellington? Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you come? You're so important and busy. Why did you care enough to visit me? Marcus felt his throat tighten. How could he explain that this 7-year-old girl had changed something fundamental in him? That she'd shown him what truly mattered? That seeing her in this cold, gray building made him want to fix everything wrong in the world? Because you're important too, Sophie, he said. And because I think maybe we were meant to meet each other on that plane. I think maybe you were meant to help my babies, and maybe I'm meant to help you. Sophie's tears came harder now. Nobody ever says things like that to me. Then nobody's been paying attention, Marcus said. Sophie, I'm going to figure something out. I don't know what yet, but I'm not leaving you here. That's a promise. You can't adopt me, Sophie said sadly. You're a single dad. Mrs. Patterson said single dads almost never get approved, especially rich ones, because they think you'll just hire nannies and not really be a parent. Marcus felt frustration surge through him. The system that was supposed to protect children like Sophie was failing her at every turn. But he pushed the anger down. Getting angry wouldn't help right now. Then I'll find another way, he said. Trust me. Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes. I trust you. Gloria appeared at the door. Time's up, Mr. Wellington. Marcus stood reluctantly. Sophie jumped up and hugged him again, squeezing tight. Thank you for coming, she whispered. Thank you for believing me about the babies. I'll be back soon, Marcus promised. And I'll call you. Is there a phone here you can use? There's one in the common room, Gloria said. Kids can receive calls between 4 and 6 p.m. I'll call tomorrow at 4, Marcus told Sophie. Okay, Sophie agreed. Walking out of that building was one of the hardest things Marcus had ever done. He kept looking back, seeing Sophie's small face pressed against a window on the second floor, watching him leave. She waved, and he waved back, his heart breaking. As Marcus drove back to Manhattan, his mind raced. Sophie's warning about the babies echoed in his head. Wrong warm. Breathing too fast, then too slow. What if she was right? What if something was seriously wrong and he'd been too busy to notice? He grabbed his phone and called his assistant. Cancel everything tomorrow morning. I need to take Oliver and Olivia to the hospital. Find me the best pediatric specialist in New York. I don't care what it costs. Then he called Janet. How are the babies? Fine, sir. They just woke up from their naps. Why? I'm taking them for a checkup tomorrow. Have you noticed anything unusual about them? Anything at all? Janet paused. Well, now that you mention it, Oliver has been warmer than usual. I thought maybe I was imagining it. And Olivia does seem to breathe strangely sometimes when she sleeps. Should I be worried? Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Sophie had been right. Just keep a close eye on them tonight, he said. I'll be home in 20 minutes. As he hung up, Marcus's mind was spinning with questions. How had Sophie known? How had she felt something that even the baby's own father and nanny had barely noticed? And more importantly, what was wrong with Oliver and Olivia? The city lights blurred past his window as Marcus pressed harder on the gas pedal. He needed to get home. He needed to see his babies. He needed to know they were okay. But deep in his gut, a terrible feeling was growing. Something was very wrong. And somehow, a 7-year-old girl in a worn yellow dress had sensed it before anyone else. Marcus didn't believe in fate or destiny. He believed in facts, numbers, and logic. But as he raced through the New York traffic, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie Mills had entered his life for a reason he was only beginning to understand. The next morning, Marcus sat in Dr. Elizabeth Chen's office at Mount Sinai Hospital, holding Olivia while Janet held Oliver. Dr. Chen was supposedly the best pediatric specialist in New York City, and Marcus had paid a small fortune to get an emergency appointment. Dr. Chen examined both babies carefully, listening to their hearts, checking their temperatures, looking in their ears and throats. Oliver whimpered but didn't cry. Olivia just stared at the doctor with wide, curious eyes. After 30 minutes of tests, Dr. Chen sat down across from Marcus with a puzzled expression. Mr. Wellington, I'm not finding anything obviously wrong, she said. Their temperatures are slightly elevated, about half a degree above normal, but that could be many things. Their breathing patterns are a bit irregular, but again, that's not uncommon in infants. But something is wrong, Marcus insisted. I can feel it. Dr. Chun looked at him sympathetically. I understand you're concerned. Being a parent, especially a single parent, can make you hyper-aware of every little thing. But honestly, your babies seem healthy. They're gaining weight appropriately, their reflexes are good, their color is normal. Marcus felt frustration building. Can you run more tests? Blood work? Scans? Something? We could, Dr. Chun said slowly. But I'm not sure what we'd be testing for. Without specific symptoms, we'd just be guessing. And some of those tests can be stressful for infants. Marcus thought about Sophie's urgent warning. Wrong warm. She'd been so certain, so scared. She'd sensed something that medical equipment apparently couldn't detect. Run the tests, Marcus said firmly. All of them. I don't care about the cost or the stress. I need to know my children are okay. Dr. Chun nodded. All right, we'll do comprehensive blood work and some imaging. It'll take a few hours to get results. You can wait in the family lounge if you'd like. The next 3 hours were torture. Marcus paced the family lounge while Janet tried to keep the babies entertained. He checked his watch every 5 minutes. He called his assistant twice to make sure everything was running smoothly at work, but his mind wasn't on business. His mind was on Sophie's words, on that feeling that something was terribly wrong. Finally, Dr. Chun returned. Her expression had changed. She looked serious now, concerned. Mr. Wellington, I need you to sit down, she said. Marcus's heart stopped. What did you find? The blood work came back with some abnormalities, Dr. Chun said carefully. Both twins have elevated levels of certain enzymes that suggest their bodies might be fighting something. But the strange thing is we can't identify what. There's no infection, no virus, no bacteria. It's like their immune systems are responding to a threat we can't see. What does that mean? Marcus demanded. Are they in danger? I don't know yet, Dr. Chun admitted. I've never seen results quite like these. I want to consult with some colleagues, maybe run a few more specialized tests. But Mr. Wellington, I have to ask, what made you bring them in today? What made you suspect something was wrong? Marcus hesitated. How could he explain that a 7-year-old foster child had sensed something wrong just by holding his babies for a few minutes? It sounded crazy. A friend noticed they seemed off, he said finally. Just a feeling. Dr. Chun studied him for a long moment. Well, your friend's feeling may have been right. I'm glad you brought them in. Whatever this is, we caught it early. That's good. So what do we do now? Marcus asked. We monitor them closely. I want to see them again in 2 days. If their enzyme levels keep rising, we'll need to consider hospitalization for observation. In the meantime, watch for any changes, fever, lethargy, unusual crying, anything. And Mr. Wellington? Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, bring them back immediately. Marcus left the hospital feeling shaken. Dr. Chun had confirmed that something was wrong with his babies, but nobody knew what. How had Sophie known? How had she felt what doctors with expensive equipment had almost missed? As soon as he got home and settled the babies with Janet, Marcus looked at his watch. 3:30. In 30 minutes, he could call Sophie. He spent those 30 minutes watching Oliver and Olivia play on their activity mat. They seemed normal, happy even. Olivia grabbed at a hanging toy. Oliver made gurgling sounds. But now Marcus saw everything through a different lens. That slightly flushed color in Oliver's cheeks. The way Olivia's breathing did seem to speed up and slow down irregularly. Sophie had seen it in minutes. He'd missed it for weeks. At exactly 4 o'clock, Marcus dialed the group home. Gloria answered. Sunshine Group Home. This is Marcus Wellington. I'd like to speak with Sophie Mills, please. Hold on. Marcus heard Gloria yelling down a hallway. Sophie. Phone. There was shuffling, then Sophie's breathless voice. Mr. Wellington? Hi, Sophie. I promised I'd call. You did. Sophie sounded so happy. I've been waiting by the phone since 3:30. Marcus smiled despite his worry. Sophie, I took the babies to the doctor today, like you suggested. Did they find something? Sophie asked urgently. Yes, the doctor said their blood work showed their bodies are fighting something, but they don't know what. How did you know, Sophie? How did you feel that something was wrong? Sophie was quiet for a moment. I don't really know how to explain it. Ever since I was little, I could just feel things about people, when they're sad or sick or scared. My mom used to say I had a gift, but my dad said it was just coincidence. Your parents, Marcus said gently. Mrs. Patterson told me they died when you were 4. I'm sorry. It's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it was a long time ago. Sophie's voice got smaller. I don't remember them much anymore. Just pieces. My mom's laugh. My dad's cologne. The way they used to read to me before bed. Marcus felt his chest tighten. This little girl had lost so much. What happened to them, if you don't mind me asking? Car accident, Sophie said simply. We were all in the car, but I was in the back in my car seat. They said that's what saved me. The car seat. But my parents, they didn't make it. That must have been so scary for you. I don't remember the accident, Sophie admitted. Just waking up in the hospital and wondering where my mom and dad were. A nice nurse stayed with me, and then Mrs. Patterson came and told me I'd be going to a foster home. I've been in foster care ever since. Marcus wanted to reach through the phone and hug her. Sophie, about the babies, the doctor wants to run more tests. She doesn't know what's making them sick yet. Is there anything else you remember feeling when you held them? Anything that might help? Sophie thought hard. It felt like something was slowly draining them. Not fast, but steady. Like someone left a tiny hole in a balloon and the air is leaking out so slowly you barely notice. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense, actually. The elevated enzymes, the vague symptoms, it all fit with something chronic and subtle. But what? That helps a lot, Marcus told her. Thank you. Mr. Wellington? Sophie's voice turned hesitant. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you care so much? About the babies being sick, I mean, I know they're your babies, but Mrs. Patterson said rich people usually just let nannies handle everything. Marcus thought about how to answer. I used to be like that, he admitted. Before I met you, I was so focused on work and money that I forgot what really mattered. But you showed me. On that airplane, you showed me how to be present. How to actually see the people I love. So now I'm trying to be the father my babies deserve. And the person I should have been all along. I showed you that? Sophie sounded amazed. You did. You're very wise for 7 years old. Sophie giggled. Mrs. Patterson says I'm an old soul. I don't know what that means, but she says it a lot. They talked for another 20 minutes. Sophie told him about the other kids at the group home. Some nice, some mean. She told him about the lumpy beds and the food that always tasted like cardboard. She told him about a stray cat that lived behind the building and how she snuck at food sometimes. Every detail made Marcus more determined to get her out of there. Sophie, I'm working on something, he said. I can't tell you exactly what yet, but I haven't forgotten my promise. I'm going to help you. I believe you, Sophie said. You're different from other grown-ups. You keep your promises. After they hung up, Marcus sat in his living room, thinking. The babies were sick with something mysterious. Sophie could somehow sense things others couldn't. The foster care system was failing an incredible child who deserved so much better. And then there was something else nagging at him. Something Sophie had said. The way she described feeling the baby's illness. Like air slowly leaking from a balloon. It reminded him of something, but he couldn't quite grasp what. His phone rang. Dr. Chen. Mr. Wellington. I consulted with a colleague who specializes in rare genetic conditions. We think we might know what's wrong with your twins. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. What is it? It's called mitochondrial disease. It's a genetic disorder where the mitochondria, the parts of cells that produce energy, don't work properly. It can cause a wide range of symptoms, and it's often hard to diagnose because it mimics other conditions. Is it serious? Marcus felt cold. It can be, but if this is what they have, we've caught it very early. There are treatments, therapies. They won't cure it, but they can manage it. Your babies could live normal, healthy lives with proper care. How do we confirm it? We need to do a muscle biopsy and some specialized genetic testing. I can schedule it for tomorrow morning if you're available. Yes, Marcus said immediately. Whatever they need. After the call ended, Marcus sat in stunned silence. His babies had a genetic disease. Something they'd been born with, something in their very cells. And somehow Sophie had sensed it just by holding them. He called the group home again. Sunshine Group Home. It was Gloria again. It's Marcus Wellington. I need to speak to Sophie again. It's urgent. She just got off the phone with you. We have rules about... Please, Marcus interrupted. It's about medical information. It's important. Gloria sighed. Fine. Hold on. A minute later, Sophie's confused voice came on. Mr. Wellington? Is everything okay? Sophie, the doctor thinks she knows what's wrong with the babies. It's called mitochondrial disease. Does that mean anything to you? Sophie gasped. Mitochondrial disease? You've heard of it? Mr. Wellington. Sophie's voice shook. That's what my parents died from. Both of them. They had the same disease. The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's hand. What? They got really sick when I was 3. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong for a long time. When they finally diagnosed them, it was too late. The disease had progressed too far. They died a year later. Sophie was crying now. The car accident, they both got dizzy at the same time. My dad was driving and he just passed out. That's why we crashed. Marcus's mind was reeling. Sophie's parents had died from the same disease his babies had. The same disease Sophie had somehow sensed in Oliver and Olivia. This couldn't be coincidence. Sophie, did the doctors ever test you for the disease? Marcus asked urgently. I don't know. Maybe. I was really young. I need to find out, Marcus said. Sophie, this is important. Do you have any medical records? Anything from when you were younger? I don't know. Maybe Mrs. Patterson has them. Marcus was already pulling up his contacts, looking for his lawyer's number. Sophie, I'm going to get those records, and I'm going to figure out what's happening here. Because this is too much of a coincidence. What do you mean? Sophie asked. I don't know yet, but something connects you to my babies. Something more than just a chance meeting on an airplane. After hanging up, Marcus immediately called his lawyer, then a private investigator. He needed Sophie's complete history, medical records, birth certificate, everything. He needed to understand why a little girl who'd lost her parents to mitochondrial disease could sense the same disease in his children. As night fell over Manhattan, Marcus stood at his window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Sophie was lying in a narrow bed in a cold group home. His babies were sleeping in their designer nursery, fighting an invisible disease in their cells. And somewhere in all of this was a truth waiting to be uncovered. A truth that would change everything. The private investigator's report arrived 3 days later in a thick manila envelope. Marcus sat at his desk, hands shaking as he opened it. Janet had taken Oliver and Olivia to their follow-up appointment with Dr. Chun, so he was alone. Inside were dozens of documents, birth certificates, medical records, foster care placement forms, and photographs. Marcus spread them across his desk and started reading. Sophie Marie Mills, born March 15, 2018, at Presbyterian Hospital in Manhattan. Parents, David Mills and Laura Mills. The birth certificate showed an address in Brooklyn, a neighborhood Marcus knew was modest but decent. Then came the medical records, pages and pages of doctor visits, tests, diagnoses. David and Laura Mills had both been diagnosed with mitochondrial disease when Sophie was 3 years old. They'd spent a year in and out of hospitals, getting weaker. The final report was dated April 2, 2022. Cause of death for both parents. Complications from mitochondrial disease, following a fatal car accident. But it was the next document that made Marcus's heart stop. A genetic test result for Sophie Mills, dated May 2022, 1 month after her parents died. The test showed she was a carrier of the genetic mutation that caused mitochondrial disease. She didn't have the active disease, but she carried the gene. The report noted that any children she had in the future would have a 50% chance of inheriting the condition. Marcus stared at the paper, his mind racing. Sophie was a carrier. His babies had the disease. But that still didn't explain how she'd sensed their illness, or why their meeting felt like more than coincidence. He kept reading. Foster care records showing Sophie's placement in 7 different homes over 3 years. School records showing she was a bright student despite constantly changing schools. A psychological evaluation noting that Sophie had unusual empathetic abilities and claims to sense emotions and physical states in others. Then Marcus found something that made him freeze. A photograph, old and faded, paper-clipped to one of the documents. It showed a young couple, David and Laura Mills, standing in front of a building. They were smiling, their arms around each other. Laura was heavily pregnant. Marcus recognized the building behind them. It was one of his hotels, the Wellington Grand in Brooklyn. His hands trembled as he picked up the photo. Why would Sophie's parents have taken a picture in front of his hotel? He flipped it over. On the back, someone had written, "Laura's last day at work before maternity leave. We'll miss the Wellington Grand." Laura Mills had worked at his hotel. Marcus grabbed his phone and called his assistant. "I need employment records from the Wellington Grand in Brooklyn, going back 7 years. I'm looking for an employee named Laura Mills." "Right away, sir." 10 minutes later, his assistant called back. "Mr. Wellington, I found her." Laura Mills worked in housekeeping at the Wellington Grand from 2016 to 2018. She left in March 2018. That would be when she had her baby. According to the records, she was an excellent employee. Never missed a day until she got sick in 2021. Marcus felt dizzy. Sophie's mother had worked for him. She'd cleaned rooms in his hotel, probably passed him in the hallways, and he'd never known. He'd never noticed her, just like he'd never noticed so many people who made his life run smoothly. "Is there anything else in her file?" Marcus asked. "Just standard stuff. Performance reviews, all positive." "Oh, and there's a note here from her supervisor saying Laura had requested to return to work part-time in 2021, but she got too sick before that could happen. The supervisor wrote that Laura was hoping to work again because they needed the money for medical bills." Medical bills. The same disease that now threatened Marcus's babies had bankrupted Sophie's family, and Sophie's mother had worked for him, probably trying desperately to save enough money to fight an illness that would eventually kill her. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. Marcus ended the call and sat in stunned silence. The connections kept multiplying. Sophie's parents worked at his hotel. They died from the same disease his babies had. Sophie could sense the disease in Oliver and Olivia. She'd been on that specific flight, in that specific moment when his babies needed her most. Couldn't all be random. But what did it mean? His phone rang. "Dr. Chen." "Mr. Wellington, I have the genetic test results for the twins. It's confirmed they have mitochondrial disease. The same type, actually, which is good because it means we can coordinate their treatment. But there's something unusual in their genetic profile that I want to discuss with you in person. Can you come to my office?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Marcus said. He grabbed his jacket and the private investigator's report, then rushed to the hospital. Dr. Chun met him in her office, looking puzzled. "Mr. Wellington, the genetic mutation your babies have is relatively rare. It's a specific variant that only appears in certain family lines. When I saw their results, I checked our database to see if we had any other cases. We have exactly one." Marcus's throat went dry. "Sophie Mills." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Because she's connected to all of this somehow. Her parents died from this disease. She sensed that my babies were sick. Her mother worked at my hotel." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "Dr. Chun, could Sophie and my babies be related? Genetically? That would explain the identical mutation," Dr. Chun said slowly. "But how would that be possible? Sophie's parents both died 3 years ago. Your babies are 9 months old. The timeline doesn't work." Marcus thought hard. What if What if Sophie's parents had more children before they died? What if Oliver and Olivia are somehow connected to the Mills family? That's something you'd need to investigate, Dr. Chun said. But Mr. Wellington, if there is a genetic connection, it could actually help us. If Sophie is related to your twins, she might be a match for certain treatments. Bone marrow transplant, stem cell therapy, these are options for mitochondrial disease if we can find compatible donors. Marcus felt hope and confusion warring in his chest. So Sophie could help save my babies? Potentially. But first, you need to figure out if they're actually related. Marcus left the hospital with more questions than answers. Back in his car, he called the private investigator. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us motivated and reminds us that our stories are making a difference in people's lives. I need you to dig deeper into David and Laura Mills. I need to know if they had any other children, if there were any adoptions, any pregnancies, anything. And I need to know if there's any connection between the Mills family and my wife Caroline. Your ex-wife, sir? The investigator asked. Yes, Caroline Wellington. I need to know if she ever knew the Mills family. I'll get on it right away. Marcus drove back to his penthouse, his mind spinning. When he arrived, Janet met him at the door with worried eyes. Mr. Wellington, something strange happened at the doctor's office today. What? Marcus asked, immediately alert. When Dr. Chun was examining Olivia, she asked me about family medical history. I told her I didn't know much because you'd never discussed it. So she asked if I could call your ex-wife to get information about her family's medical background. Marcus felt his stomach drop. And I called Caroline's number like you had in the emergency contacts. But the number was disconnected. So I tried calling her parents, the number you had listed for emergencies. That was disconnected too. Mr. Wellington, it's like Caroline and her entire family just vanished. Marcus sank onto the couch. Caroline had left him right after the twins were born, saying she couldn't handle his obsession with work. She'd taken a settlement, a generous one, and disappeared. He'd been too proud and too hurt to chase after her. But now she was completely unreachable? There's more, Janet said hesitantly. Dr. Chun needed Caroline's medical information for the genetic testing, so she tried to access Caroline's hospital records from when she gave birth to the twins. Mr. Wellington, the records were sealed. Legally sealed. Dr. Chun said she's never seen that before except in cases of adoption or surrogacy. The room seemed to tilt. What are you saying? I don't know what I'm saying, Janet admitted. But something isn't right. Caroline disappeared. Her family disappeared. The medical records are sealed. And now we find out the twins have a rare genetic disease that somehow connects them to a little girl whose mother worked at your hotel. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from the private investigator. Urgent. Found something. Calling now. The phone rang immediately. Marcus answered. What did you find? Mr. Wellington, I accessed sealed adoption records. Don't ask me how. David and Laura Mills did have another child. A baby born 2 months before they died. They gave the baby up for adoption because they were too sick to care for another child. They already knew they were dying. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. When was this baby born? The file shows twin babies, Mr. Wellington. A boy and a girl. Born January 2022. Oliver and Olivia were born in January 2022. The adoption was private, the investigator continued. Arranged through a lawyer. The adoptive parents' names were sealed, but I found a payment record. $50,000 paid to Laura Mills for medical expenses. Paid by Wellington Hotel Corporation. Marcus couldn't breathe. His company had paid for the adoption, which meant someone in his organization had arranged it. Someone had taken Sophie's biological siblings and... Who authorized the payment? Marcus demanded. The authorization signature is Caroline Wellington's. The phone slipped from Marcus's hand and clattered to the floor. Caroline, his wife. She'd arranged to adopt Sophie's siblings, David and Laura Mills' twin babies, while the parents were dying. She'd hidden it from him. She'd sealed the records. She'd made him think Oliver and Olivia were his biological children when they were actually adopted. And Sophie. Sophie had lost her parents and her baby siblings without ever knowing they'd existed. Janet was staring at him. "Mr. Wellington, what's wrong? You're completely white." Marcus couldn't answer. His entire world had just shattered. The babies he'd thought were his biological children were actually Sophie's siblings. The woman he'd married had orchestrated an elaborate deception. And Sophie, brave, kind, intuitive Sophie, had unknowingly saved her own brother and sister on that airplane. "Sir." Janet touched his arm. "Should I call someone?" Marcus picked up his phone with shaking hands. "Get me the Wellington Grand's employment records again. I need Laura Mills's emergency contact information. Every number, every address, everything." As Janet hurried to make the call, Marcus walked to the nursery where Oliver and Olivia were sleeping. They looked so peaceful, so innocent. They had no idea that their entire existence was built on lies. But they also had a sister who'd been alone for 3 years, bouncing between foster homes, when her own siblings had been living in a Manhattan penthouse the whole time. Marcus thought about Sophie's face pressed against that group home window, the way she'd waited by the phone for his call, how she'd told him she trusted him to keep his promises. He'd made her a promise. He'd said he would help her, and now he knew exactly how he was going to keep that promise. But first, he needed to understand the full truth. He needed to know why Caroline had done this, why she'd hidden the adoption, why she'd disappeared, and most importantly, he needed to figure out how to tell Sophie that the babies she'd saved were actually her brother and sister. His phone rang again. The investigator. "Mr. Wellington, there's one more thing. I found a letter. It was in the sealed adoption file, written by Laura Mills to her daughter Sophie. She wrote it right before she died." "What does it say?" Marcus whispered. "It says, 'My dearest Sophie, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Your father and I made the hardest decision of our lives. We gave your baby brother and sister to a family who could care for them. I pray someday you'll find them. I pray they'll know they have a big sister who would have loved them so much. Find them, Sophie. Find your family. Love, Mama." Marcus's vision blurred with tears. Laura Mills had died hoping Sophie would find her siblings. And against all odds, on a crowded airplane at 30,000 feet, she had. She just didn't know it yet. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, staring at the letter Laura Mills had written to Sophie. The private investigator had sent him a scanned copy, and Marcus had read it at least 50 times, each word burning into his memory. At 6 in the morning, he made a decision. He needed to talk to Caroline. He needed answers. But Caroline had vanished, and her phone was disconnected. So Marcus did what he did best. He used his money and connections to find people who didn't want to be found. By noon, his investigator had tracked Caroline to a small coastal town in Maine. She was living under her maiden name, Caroline Porter, in a rented cottage by the ocean. Marcus booked a private jet immediately. "Janet, I need you to watch the babies for 2 days," he told the nanny. "I have to take a trip. Is everything all right, sir?" Janet looked worried. "No," Marcus said honestly, "but it will be. I hope." Before leaving, Marcus called the group home. "I need to speak with Sophie Mills." Gloria sounded annoyed. "Mr. Wellington, you've been calling every day. We have other kids here who need to use the phone too." "Please," Marcus said. "Just 5 minutes." Gloria sighed loudly but got Sophie. When the little girl's voice came on the line, Marcus felt his heart squeeze. "Mr. Wellington, are the babies okay? Did the doctors figure out how to help them?" "They're going to be fine, Sophie. The doctors have a treatment plan. But I need to go on a trip for a couple days. I won't be able to call tomorrow." "Oh," Sophie sounded disappointed. "That's okay. Where are you going?" Marcus hesitated. He couldn't tell her the truth yet. Not until he understood everything. "Just a business trip. But Sophie, I want you to know something. I haven't forgotten about you. I'm working on keeping my promise." "I know you are," Sophie said softly. "You're the only grown-up who ever keeps promises to me." After hanging up, Marcus felt even more determined. This little girl had been failed by every adult in her life. He wouldn't be another person who let her down. The flight to Maine took 2 hours. Marcus rented a car and drove to the address his investigator had provided. The cottage was small and weathered, sitting alone on a rocky stretch of beach. Caroline's car was parked outside. Marcus sat in his rental car for 10 minutes, gathering courage. Then he walked to the door and knocked. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Caroline stood there, and Marcus barely recognized her. She'd lost weight. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore old jeans and a faded sweater. But the biggest change was her eyes. They looked haunted, guilty, afraid. "Marcus," she whispered, "how did you find me?" "We need to talk," Marcus said. "About Oliver and Olivia. About who they really are." Caroline's face went white. For a moment, Marcus thought she might slam the door in his face. But then her shoulders sagged in defeat. "Come in." The cottage was sparse but clean. Caroline led him to a small living room and sat on the couch, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. "How did you find out?" she asked quietly. "The babies got sick. They have mitochondrial disease. The genetic testing revealed they have a rare mutation that doesn't match my DNA." Marcus kept his voice steady, though anger simmered beneath. "Then I met their biological sister on an airplane. A 7-year-old girl named Sophie Mills who's been living in foster care." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "Sophie. Oh God, Sophie. Tell me everything," Marcus demanded. "Now." Caroline took a shaky breath. "It started 3 years ago. I've been trying to get pregnant for 2 years. But it wasn't working. The fertility doctor said there was less than a 5% chance we'd ever have biological children. I was devastated." "You never told me that," Marcus said. "Because you were never there." Caroline's voice rose. "You were always working, always traveling, always choosing business over me. I felt so alone, Marcus. I wanted a baby so badly, but I couldn't do it by myself." Marcus felt guilt stab through him, but he stayed quiet. She needed to finish. "I started looking into adoption," Caroline continued. "Private adoption because I thought it would be faster. That's when I met Laura Mills. She worked as a housekeeper at the Wellington Grand. She came to me one day crying, begging. She was dying, Marcus. She and her husband both had mitochondrial disease, and they were dying. They had a 7-year-old daughter and twin babies on the way. They couldn't care for 3 children while dying. So you offered to take the twins," Marcus said flatly. "Laura came to me specifically because I was your wife. She knew we had money for medical care. She knew the babies would need expensive treatment for their genetic condition. She was desperate to save them." Caroline wiped her eyes. "I paid for all her medical expenses, $50,000. In exchange, she agreed to give us the twins through a private adoption." "Without telling me," Marcus said coldly. "I tried to tell you," Caroline cried. "So many times. But you were always in meetings or traveling or too tired to talk. And then I convinced myself it didn't matter. The babies would be ours legally. You'd never know they were adopted. We'd be a family. So you sealed the medical records. You lied on the birth certificates. You made me think they were my biological children." Caroline nodded miserably. "Yes, I did all of that. And when they were born, when I held them for the first time, I loved them so much. But I also felt so guilty. Guilty for taking them from their sister. Guilty for lying to you. The guilt ate me alive, Marcus." "So you left," Marcus said. "I couldn't handle it anymore. Every time I looked at Oliver and Olivia, I thought about Sophie, a little girl who'd lost her parents and her siblings in the same year. I destroyed that child's family." Caroline was crying hard now. "I took a settlement and ran because I'm a coward. I couldn't face what I'd done." Marcus felt anger, betrayal, and something else, a terrible understanding. Caroline had made horrible choices, but she'd been desperate and alone, and he'd been too absent to notice. Did Laura and David know about Sophie's empathetic abilities? Marcus asked. Caroline looked up in surprise. "How do you know about that?" "Because Sophie sensed that Oliver and Olivia were sick when no one else could. She saved their lives by telling me to get them checked. Fresh tears rolled down Caroline's face. Laura told me Sophie was special. She said Sophie could feel things other people couldn't. Laura believed Sophie would find her siblings someday. She said their connection was too strong to stay broken forever. She was right, Marcus said. Sophie found them on an airplane. She calmed them when they wouldn't stop crying. She sensed they were sick. And she did all of this without knowing they were her brother and sister. Caroline put her face in her hands. What have I done? Oh God, what have I done? Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray ocean. His mind was racing. Oliver and Olivia needed their sister. Sophie needed her siblings. But the situation was legally and emotionally complicated. I'm going to fix this, Marcus said, turning back to Caroline. I'm going to tell Sophie the truth, and I'm going to bring her home. Home. Caroline looked up, confused. To my penthouse, with Oliver and Olivia, where she belongs. Marcus, you can't just take her out of foster care. The legal system. I don't care about the legal system. Marcus's voice thundered. That little girl has been shuffled between homes for 3 years while her brother and sister lived in luxury. Her mother worked at my hotel, probably cleaning my room, and I never noticed her. Sophie deserves better. She deserves her family. You can't adopt her as a single father, Caroline said quietly. The system doesn't like single dad adoptions, especially wealthy ones. They'll say you'll just hire nannies and never be present. Marcus knew she was right. He'd heard the same thing from Mrs. Patterson. Single fathers, especially rich ones, almost never got approved for adoption. The system was biased against them. Then what do I do? Marcus asked, feeling helpless for the first time since this started. Caroline was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that shocked him. You marry someone they'll approve. Someone who can prove they'll be a stable, present mother figure. I'm not going to marry some random woman just to adopt Sophie, Marcus said. Then marry me again. Marcus stared at her. What? Marry me again? Caroline repeated, standing up. Not for real. Just on paper. We'll tell the foster care system that we reconciled, that we want to adopt Sophie together, that she'll help her biological siblings manage their disease. Once the adoption is finalized, we can divorce again quietly. You want to fake a marriage to adopt Sophie? Marcus said slowly. I want to fix what I broke, Caroline said, her voice shaking. I destroyed that little girl's family. The least I can do is help put it back together. Even if it means lying one more time. Marcus wanted to say no. He wanted nothing to do with Caroline after what she'd done. But he thought about Sophie's face, her worn yellow dress, her too small shoes. He thought about her pressed against that group home window waiting for him. If we do this, Marcus said carefully, there are conditions. You move back to the penthouse but in a separate bedroom. You help care for all 3 children until the adoption is final. You attend every therapy session, every family meeting, everything. And when it's done, you disappear from my life forever. Done, Caroline said immediately. And one more thing, Marcus added. We tell Sophie the truth. All of it. No more lies. Caroline nodded. She deserves the truth. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. I need you to draw up papers for a remarriage and begin adoption proceedings for Sophie Mills. I want it done as fast as legally possible. I don't care what it costs. His lawyer sputtered protests about timelines and procedures, but Marcus cut him off. Just get it done. And find me the best family lawyer in New York. Someone who can navigate the foster care system. After hanging up, Marcus looked at Caroline. She looked small and broken. Nothing like the confident woman he'd married 5 years ago. Why? He asked. Why did you really come to Maine? Why hide here? Because I couldn't face the babies, Caroline whispered. Every time I looked at them, I saw Sophie's face. I imagined her alone, scared, wondering why her siblings were taken away. I couldn't live with what I'd done, Marcus. So I ran. Running doesn't fix anything, Marcus said. I know that now. Caroline met his eyes. Let me help fix this. Please. It's the only way I can live with myself. Marcus thought about it. He didn't trust Caroline. He might never forgive her. But if remarrying her was what it took to bring Sophie home, he'd do it. We leave for New York tomorrow morning, he said. And then we tell Sophie everything. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep again. He lay awake in a small motel room, thinking about the conversation ahead. How do you tell a 7-year-old that the babies she saved are actually her brother and sister? That her mother's dying wish was for her to find them? That she'd been separated from them because of lies and legal manipulation? He called Janet to check on the twins. How are they? Perfect, Janet reported. Oliver just learned to clap his hands. Olivia's trying to crawl. They're getting stronger every day. That's good, Marcus said. Janet, things are about to change. A lot. I need to know I can count on you. Always, Mr. Wellington, Janet said loyally. The next morning, Marcus and Caroline flew back to New York together. The plane ride was silent and tense. When they landed, Marcus went straight to his lawyer's office to sign papers. Then he called Mrs. Patterson. Mr. Wellington, she said, sounding surprised. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I need to set up a meeting with Sophie Mills, Marcus said. Tomorrow, at your office. It's about her family. Her family? Mr. Wellington, Sophie doesn't have any family. That's why she's in foster care. She has family, Marcus said firmly, and it's time she knew about them. Thank you for watching. If you found this story engaging, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective adds value to the conversation. To stay updated with future stories exploring themes of race, inequality, and the unexpected choices that shape lives, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful and thought-provoking content.